Hello, welcome along to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week we're chatting to Molly Green. Molly writes historical fiction set in wartime. You can hear why she does it because she wants to honour the women who served their country.
Girls, women, what they did was just as important, just as marvellous, just as brave. They took just as much risk. So the sisters' books, the trilogy, they are all of the same family, but they're all very different and they all do extremely different jobs.
And Molly's not really a planner. In fact, when she starts, she's only sure of 2 words that she wants to write.
I want to type chapter 1. I can't wait to type chapter 1, and all I've got in my mind are very few little notes of ideas of perhaps the heroine's name and maybe the hero's name, the setting. The setting is really important. Once I have the setting, then I feel I'm sort of off.
It's all on the way with Molly Green in this week's Writer's Routine. Yes, welcome along to the show. Thank you for being there. My name is Dan Simpson. This is the show where we take a look around an author's working day, where we learn from the very best. And I've teamed up with the Writers Rising Retreat to give you the chance to do that in another way. At the last minute, I have snagged the perfect opportunity for you to learn from some of the best around. Because right now, hundreds of committed writers are getting ready for one of the most important writing experiences of the year, Writers Rising 2024. And whether you are a seasoned novelist or you're just starting out, I think we always need some help, someone to G us along, just some new ideas. Whichever one you are invited to join the critically acclaimed retreat designed to transform both your writing and you. On October the 25th through to the 27th, you can take a break from the ordinary and step into a magical weekend of immersive workshops that focus on process, craft, and publication. You'll learn from some of the greatest writing teachers around, including Anne Lamott, Cheryl Strayed, and Marlon James too. You'll walk away with creative collaborations and exciting professional connections with industry experts, Penguin editors, literary agents, they'll all be there. I'm certain pens will be moving, fingers typing, whichever one applies to you. The most important part, you will be writing. Now, I appreciate this is happening over in the States, and you might not be able to get there with 2 weeks' notice. Well, the best part is you can actually get involved from anywhere. The retreat has a fantastic remote option too. And for the next couple of weeks, I'm so excited to be partnering with Writers Rising as one of this year's sponsors. And as a special gift to you, I've been able to get you a 10% discount on your in-person or virtual retreat ticket. 10% off. Just take a look around, see what you find, see if this is the right thing to just inspire you a little bit more because we're heading into NaNoWriMo too. Visit writersrising.com and enter WR10 to get that discount. That's WR10 and you can buy your ticket now before they sell out. This week on the show, we're joined by Molly Green, who has had a busy life. I can't really do justice to a lot of these stories, but she sold lipstick in Denver, modelled in Atlanta, assisted the UN narcotics director in Geneva, helped out film producers too, and now writes novels from a train carriage that she's had made in her home. She writes non-fiction and fiction under a few different names. The new novel is Courage of the Cabinet Girl, set in 1941. Britain, of course, in the throes of World War II. It's all about Katharina Valentine, who feels sidelined working in the War Office in a dark, airless basement maze. But suddenly she gets the chance to work directly for Winston Churchill himself. And then things start to look up. However, there is a chance that she could violate the Official Secrets Act, and Katie then faces serious repercussions. If you look at the cover of this book, I think you'll know the type of a gloriously enchanting, heartwarming tale that really does throw you way back into history. Molly has worked on these types of stories for a little while now and loves it. She's published a series on Bletchley Park, and the idea for that was given to her by a publisher, actually. Hear all about that in just a sec. She's written stories under her official name, Denise Barnes. She calls herself Denise a few times, just to flag that bit up. Also another pen name, Fenella Forster. You can hear why she writes in the past and writes in the past. Also, why early starts still hang around from a job that she had years ago. The sentence she uses to describe the job that she had way back is like simply incredible. I don't think you could dream such a perfectly constructed, very funny sentence. So keep your ears peeled for that. We talk about research and why she gets incredibly annoyed when people think she hasn't done it and finds out more often than not it's not her in the wrong, it's whoever the critic is. There's a lot going on, a lot of brilliant tips, and Molly is just like gloriously joyous about what she's able to do, this third act in her life, and I find that really inspiring and invigorating, and I'm sure you will too. So let's jump into it with Molly Green, and we start as we always do with what she sees around her in the place where she sits down to write.
Well, the place where I write at the moment, and I hope it will be forever as long as I am writing, is a railway carriage that my builders built for me. And it's quite stunning. It looks on the outside exactly like a railway carriage. It has a real railway door, 1930s door, and it just looks absolutely stunningly fantastic. And when I come in, I go into a first-class compartment that looks as if it's been removed from the Orient Express. It's really lovely. And I've got all sorts of features that are authentic. I've got a luggage rack with a couple of suitcases on the top of my late husband's and his summer hat. And I've got British Rail, Midlands Mirror, beautiful upholstery, and that's absolutely super. That's where I would go if I want to think about things. If it's raining, I have a coffee break there. I've got a little folding table that they built for me as well. And I can just relax or do proofreading or read a research book. It's just my relaxing thing. Then I have the operations room, which is actually from an RAF, but it's a facsimile of an RAF sign. And that says, because there's a divider between the first class and my office. My office is about 2/3, first class is 1/3 of the room. And this is a wonderful office. It's still part of the train, with the lovely sort of kind of overly arched roof and everything. But it's just full of books, hundreds of books around me, map on the wall with United Kingdom, which is useful when my heroines have to travel around the country, and a very long worktop where I can spread out my papers and research books of the time. That's files, printer that comes out on a drawer and goes back in again. It's just wonderful. I'm so lucky, and I love it writing here. Even if I feel a bit fed up, I think, oh, do I want to write today? And I just walk in, and it just makes me smile.
So, of all the places in the world you could write, Molly, why have you come to commandeer this as your office? You could be in the kitchen, you could be doing it in a living room. Why an old steam train carriage?
Because I love trains. I've always loved trains all my life, and I've been on very, very long train journeys. One train journey from London to Shanghai, all by train. Morocco and back on the train. I do love trains. You just meet interesting people, characters actually. So that's part of the joy. Now I'm a writer that I sort of watch them, and I just love the romance of it. You never know exactly what's going to happen on a train, and I have had a lot of adventures. Some of them not too good, but nevertheless I still absolutely love them. So I've moved here to just outside Lewes about 2 years ago, and the first year I had my office in bedroom 3, which you do if you've got lucky enough to have the space. And then my builders said, you said you wanted a garden office, any theme that you might like. And I said, well, I'd like it to look like a train. And they were so thrilled. And they said, if you let us build a train, they said it'll be the highlight of our decade. And they built it, and it just looks fantastic.
So you're sat there in your train and you've described pretty marvellously what you have around you. Is there anything a bit more logistical around you, I would say? Something for your work? So is there planning? Is there plotting? Have you got notebooks, Post-it notes?
Oh, yes, I do. I don't plan anything. I'm very just, I want to type chapter 1. I can't wait to type chapter 1, and all I've got in my mind are very few little notes of ideas of perhaps the heroine's name and maybe the hero's name, the setting. The setting is really important. Once I have the setting, then I feel I'm sort of off, because the setting is going to be carefully chosen to make sure that it's a bit unusual. I don't want something that is just the usual kind of wartime. I don't know. There are a lot of wartime books. I want mine to be a bit different. And so, yes, I have notebooks and a little bit untidy, but not terribly. But as I say, I don't do any actual plotting at all. It's really, sometimes it's awful, because it gets me down a dead end, and I think I've sort of bound myself in here and I'm not quite sure how to get out, but I always do in the end. I'm a very early riser because when I was in my 20s, which is a very long time ago, I used to work as a vegetarian cook in a sanatorium in Bavaria. And I had to be up at 5 every morning and to be in the kitchen by 5:30 making muesli for about 100 people. This is going back a very long time, decades. And it just kind of got me into, and then I did an Open University course in my 30s. And again, in those days, you had to be up very early to listen to the recordings. It wasn't like now that you can put them on whenever it suits you. And so I am early. I'm almost always up at 5:30, even on weekends, Christmas Day. It makes no difference to me. And it makes no difference to me what days I write. In other words, I will write on Christmas Day if I'm here and just feel I want to. So I get up early. And I have my early morning cup of tea and my 2 oat cakes, because that's the only thing that really pulls me round. Feed my little cat Bella, who I rescued a year ago from the rescue centre up the road from me, and make sure she's all right. And then I just have a shower and wash hair and all this sort of thing. And then I do normally do my writing in the morning, because that's really when I'm freshest. That doesn't mean to say I don't do anything later on. Sometimes I'm doing chores and things, and I'll do writing in the afternoon. Or if I'm on a roll, I might continue. Evening is no good for me at all. I do occasionally, but it's rare. My main writing is morning, right through until perhaps from 8:30 in the morning until about 1 o'clock, and then break off for lunch. And that's usually it for the day. Then I will pack up, because I've sort of had enough and I've got other things I need to do. But I've thoroughly enjoyed my morning almost always.
So in that stretch of 4 or 5 hours from 8 till 1, what's the aim? Do you go by a word count? Are you just there to explore?
Yes, I do a bit, because I feel that I am quite a disciplined person. And if I was given a 3-year contract to get a book in, I'd take 3 years. If I'm given, a few months, then I'll really do my darndest. I mean, there is a limit to that, but I like about 9-10 months to write a novel, because my books are historical. And so I have to do a huge amount of research, a lot of reading and even visiting the places. I like to really, it is a very normal kind of word count for a lot of writers that I know, and try to do 1,000 a day. I mean, sometimes it's hard to squeeze 200. Sometimes, yesterday I did 2,500, which is a good day for me. But if I can do my 1,000, I feel quite reasonably, happy, because I think if I do 5 to 6,000 every week, so that means writing almost every day, which I do. I've got enough time at the other end to. This is a very rough draft I'm talking about. Awful. Just bash it out. And I think, oh my goodness, this is awful. But usually I do keep going, thinking, yes, there'll be plenty of time at the end for me to fill in all sorts of atmosphere and details of the setting and everything. But I'm very conscious when I write, even on the draft, that it's reasonable. I still want to do my punctuation in the right place. I still want to get the grammar right, but I don't absolutely stress over it. I do pretty much, but I love English, so I am a bit paranoid on it has to be the right the right words at the right time.
We get a little bit nerdy and very interested in technology. Now, as you're, we had a little bit of trouble getting on the call earlier, Molly. So I'm wondering if are you part of the old school? Do you still like to be very tactile with your writing? Do you do any of it handwritten before you move to a laptop?
I have something called dystonia, which is a brain thing that very commonly affects your hand. So about 30-40 years ago, I found I wasn't able to write with my right hand at all. And I had to go to a specialist in the end, and they sort of tried to explain to me what it is. Luckily, it hasn't gone any further because it can spread, but it hasn't. And so I type, but I'm a touch typist. I did a secretarial course in the States. So I love typing. And so I go straight onto my wonderful Mac, which has got a big screen. And then I have my manuscript up on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, I have what I call a grid. And the grid tells me, each chapter, I put just 2 or 3 sentences and the timeline on it, so I can keep a watch of, if it's dramatic, if it's romantic, if it's just to sort of do the pacing and everything. And so that I type straight away. And I don't believe these people that say, oh, I have to have my pen in my hand, I'm much closer emotionally. I just think that's rubbish. I think if they had what I've got with this dystonia, you'd have to go straight on. And I feel I can get just as emotional just seeing the words pop up on the screen.
Right. Yeah. Now, what amazes me is, I was just looking through your history, right? So, you've been busy. You just said you did a typing course over in the States. You mentioned working out in Europe. I know that you've modelled in Atlanta. So you've been busy. And you are, more or less 10 novels down now, Molly. And I think you sold an estate agent business, right, before you became an author. So what went through your brain? What impacted the decision to think, now I am going to write a novel?
It was the right time. I had a big birthday coming up. I'd had my estate agency for 17 years, and I thought this is the time to see whether, because I've always written, even when I was a child, I used to write short stories and actually serials, and mine was always chosen. Nobody else's in the class. I was probably about 9-10 years of age, and mine would be put on the notice board. My serial, and the little children would cluster round, and they'd say, well, what's going to happen next? And I hadn't got a clue. It's just like I am now. I haven't changed in all those years. And I thought, oh, gosh, I've got to find something else. And then, another little story would go up, continuing this particular one. And I loved seeing the children reading my stories. That was my first audience, really. So I've always written. And then when I got older, I've written lots of, articles and some short stories, occasionally getting one published, very occasionally. And I always thought, oh, it must be wonderful. I've been a huge reader since I was 4. I've always read, always. I always have a book in my handbag. I just have it with me. I just love, I'm panicking if I haven't got a book. So I just have thought for years and years and years, I don't think I'm clever enough to write a novel. Oh, I wonder if I am, though. And I had a very successful estate agency business. And I thought, well, I had 6 branches. So it was a big business, and it was on the market for about 1.75 million. And they produced it. So I thought, if I sell it, pay off the mortgage, don't have to work anymore. Husband had already, retired. He was a few years older than me. And I thought we can go on nice holidays and everything, and I'll have the leisure to write a novel, see if I really can do it. Unfortunately, I sold my business to 2 con men, obviously unwittingly. And so I ended up writing a book called Seller Beware, How Not to Sell Your Business, which was sort of snapped up by the first publisher I sent it to. That was not what was in my mind. It was a non-fiction, it was a memoir, it was pretty awful, really. But when I had the trouble with trying to get my money, which I never did, I was writing my very first novel, and I wrote a trilogy in the end, and there were... I self-published the first 2, and the third one I felt sort of even extra proud of it, and I thought this one is special. And I thought, I'm just going to submit, because I had been submitting the other 2 before I self-published, and you had, good rejections, they call them, but it wasn't, exactly what I was looking for. And then I had this book called Kitty's Story, the third of the trilogy, and I thought, I'm going to have another go. I went to an RNA, the Romantic Novelists Association conference, and I was there the evening before, on the Thursday evening, because I like to sort of settle in and everything. And it was supper was the sort of start of that weekend, but there were only about 30 people go early. And I had my tray and this table with 3 women sat there. I didn't know them, but they waved me over, and we had a wonderful evening. And they were all published by big publishers. One was, HarperCollins, one was Random House and everything. It was all, and I thought, well, is their writing really, I'm really pleased with what I've done with these 3 novels. Are theirs really better than mine? I thought they must be. Anyway, this woman who was, she was a little bit older than the other 2. And she said to me, what do you write? And I said, well, I'm self-published, all apologetically, because you sort of were in those days, going back about 10 years. So she said, no, tell me. And I told her about Kitty in the war, Second World War. And she said, do you know, I think that my editor would be really interested in that. Now, when you're sitting with strangers, you're having a glass of wine and it's all lovely, you don't really think anything's going to come of it. I've forgotten about it totally. And the next day we had the big welcome conference with about 300 of us. And at the end, I saw this woman, she was at the front and I was right at the back, coming up towards me. I thought, oh, that's that nice woman that I had supper with last night. And I still forgot about what she said about introducing. She came and actually got hold of my hand. Come on, Denise. My editor is there. She's the senior commissioning editor of HarperCollins, my dream publishers. And she said, I want to introduce you to Helen. And she introduced me to Helen. And that was how it took a long time. It was sort of several months and everything. But Helen wrote Kitty's Story. And she wrote back to me. She said, it's lovely, got all the details and the atmosphere of World War II. Great characters, great plot. But, and there was this, it was a very long email, but. So I thought, oh, here's the but. But you've self-published it. It's a trilogy. We couldn't possibly publish it. And then there was a lot more. And another but came. And the second but said, but would you like to write something fresh for us? Oh, and it took a period of quite a few weeks, but anyway, finally she rang up and she said, "We're ready to go with you." And she said, "My another editor is going to call you. She won't keep you waiting as long as I have." The editor called me, the second editor, the next day, and she said, "We want to offer you a 3-book deal." I couldn't believe it. I couldn't. I was so excited. I was nearly beside myself. I rushed in to tell Edward, my husband, and he said, he knew, all how I'd tried so long, sort of, submitting and everything. And he said, "Oh, that's good, isn't it?" And I thought, no, it's not just good. It's absolutely fantastic. And that's how I got it, with this kind author that had never seen me before, doing something that lovely for me. I never forgot her.
Does that go on with you now? Have you found yourself being a bit more kind and willing to pay it forward?
And I managed to do it with a writing friend of mine. I did. And she's now, I think she sells more than I do. She's, I did. And so I do try to do, I always try to do that. And if anybody is a beginner writer, I try to give them a little bit of time if they email me and say, "I found your website, Molly, and I'm just sort of starting out." I will give them a little bit of attention, because I never forgot Cat Black. It took me 2 years to get hold. She gave me her card, but I never could reach her. But I kept on trying a few times a year. And once I did, and she said, "I'm just so glad it all worked out for you." And then when I tried again, it was all sort of, she doesn't write for them anymore. But that's who it was.
More with Molly in just a sec, chatting about her new book, Courage of the Cabinet Girl. If you're already inspired to take a look at it for yourself, make sure you use our brand new Bookshop.org store that we've got going on over there. We've created a special shop for the podcast over at Bookshop.org. They work to financially support local independent bookshops. It's a way that you can conveniently order and support the little guys, not the big monopolies. You know who we're talking about. So if you get to the Writer's Routine shop on there, you'll find books from all the authors that we've featured on the show. So if you're inspired to read it, like today's with Molly, please do have a look on there first, because it's win-win-win. It helps, the author, obviously. It helps local independent bookshops, and we all know how valuable they are. And it helps the podcast. There's so much on there. We've got all the books pretty much that we've featured throughout the years. There is recommendations from me, recommendations from you, and some really inspiring books to get you writing too. I will drop the link in the episode notes wherever you're listening, but you can find it at uk.bookshop.org/shop/writer's routine, which is why I'll stick it in the episode notes. You can also find it at writersroutine.com. I've stuck a link in the menu there. Just if you're thinking about buying a book, have a look there, see if that's the best way for you to do it. It'll really help us all out. Let's get back to it then with Molly Green, chatting about that new novel, Courage of the Cabinet Girl. You can find out why she gets extremely cross when people think she's wrong. Also, what she knows when she's writing as a pantser. Is there any element of plotting in there at all? What's the idea that's suckered her in and driving her onwards? We'll find out more. And we get back to it, chatting very simply about her love of war writing. Why is she always travelling back to this quite specific time frame?
When I did my trilogy, the first one took place in the First World War, in really mostly in Australia. And the second one was all family. It's a real saga, was a more modern heroine in the 2000 and something. And then the third one I wanted to go back into, but going on the Second World War, the whole family was linked. Even though I did it in a strange order, it kind of worked. And that's where I really loved it. And the thing is, because I told you I am a much older, very mature writer, and I was born just after the war, and my mum and dad went all through the Blitz in London. They lived in London, they went through it. It was pretty horrifying. So I'm fairly close to that, in my own family. And so my mother used to sometimes tell me little anecdotes of strange little things that happened, like she had my sister at the time in a pram, and my mother and father came from quite humble background. And Mum said that Carol was in the pram, and it was pouring with rain, and a taxi drew up, and the door opened, and a lady said in a very posh voice, "You just come into this taxi. It doesn't matter where you're going. Bring your baby and everything." And she was incredibly posh. And she turned out to be a lady so-and-so. And my mum never forgot it. She said that was how the world did seem to be. We were all pulling together. It didn't matter who you were. You knew we were all in it, terrible though it was. We helped one another. So these little things I do actually bring into my novels. And I know that they read correctly because they're authentic.
So the new novel, Molly, is Courage for the Cabinet Girl. Just tell us about the very first moment that the idea for what became this story came into your head.
Well, yes, because sometimes HarperCollins chooses and says, will I do it? As they did my Bletchley Park series. They said, would you do a series on? They always give me 3 book deals, which is jolly nice, but it's very daunting as well. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I do choose, and I did choose the Cabinet War Rooms because my husband and I did a 5-day tour with about 15 people following in Churchill's footsteps. And we had Terry Charman, who was the historian of the Imperial War Museum, taking us, and we had Celia Sams, who was the granddaughter of Churchill. Mm-hmm. So they were a marvellous combination, and they took us all over the place with where Churchill was, his school and everything. But they took us down into this is years ago, way before I ever wrote novels. Took us down to in the Cabinet War Rooms, going underground, which was very, very secret. It was just as secret, if not more so than Bletchley Park, because this is where Churchill absolutely ran the whole of the Second World War. And I was fascinated. I mean, I've got these 2 marvellous people, Terry Charman and Celia Sands and everything. And I thought, this is absolutely marvellous. And I wrote notes and took photos and everything. And when we had to try and think of the 10th novel, of the setting, I just thought, well, that would be marvellous. And I don't remember reading or seeing another author who has actually, I think somebody did once just mention it somehow. I can't remember, but I haven't read the book. But to have the setting there for the whole novel, I just thought it was wonderful. Now, because the Cabinet War Rooms is very claustrophobic, I've been down there since because I needed to do some research to have it fresh in my mind to write the novel. I knew that I wanted to get my heroine out of it for a time, and she needed to have a little break from who it turns out to be the hero. So I did the part of the war, which was sort of 1942, where she actually goes with Churchill and some of his entourage to Washington, to the White House. So I'm really pleased with that because the setting is so claustrophobic that it made me feel that I needed to get out, let alone a reader would want to come out of it. So that's where we are. It's Bletchley Park. They picked it for me. I picked the sister series. What I try to do is shine a light on the girls and women because they haven't had the focus that the men have. And I know the boys were very, very brave. I don't, not acknowledge that one bit. But the girls, women, what they did was just as important, just as marvellous, just as brave. They took just as much risk. So the sisters' book, the books, the trilogy, they are all of the same family, but they're all very different and they all do extremely different jobs. 2 of them I hadn't really ever heard of.
You're focusing on the women, on the heroines in this situation. It must be quite... Because of the way that you write, you have a place in mind, you have almost a job, and you have a heroine, and then it kind of goes from there. What are you doing to get to know your characters to make sure the heroine you're writing about this time is quite different from the heroine you might have been writing about last time?
Yes, that's absolutely. I might write a tiny little note on perhaps she's tall and her age, and perhaps she's got dark hair and watercolor eyes and everything. But I really don't, to know her, I have to write into the book. It's really strange. She develops in my mind as I'm actually writing. So sometimes I have to go back to the beginning, give her a little bit more depth, because it's been a bit slim since, from then. But once I get sort of going, which probably could take me 7 or 8 chapters to get into who she really is, then I'm flying. But as I say, might have to just go back and add a few, a little bit of a layer to her here and there too. But I like her to develop with the reader as well. So I don't sort of spill everything into her at the beginning. It's a sort of I have a fairly slowish pace to get to know the characters, and it happens with the hero as well. And occasionally I go into the hero's point of view, and I don't do it on every novel, but when it feels right. And I love it. I love writing as a man. I wouldn't want to do a whole novel, but to do 3 or 4 chapters, I love it. I feel ever such a sense of freedom. I can throw a few swear words in, nothing dreadful, because I'm not writing. I haven't got that sort of readership, but I can sort of let myself go a little bit, and I enjoy that as a total change from the heroine.
Let's talk a bit about research, because I know that you don't plot, as you say. You just want to write the words chapter 1 and then get on board, on your way with it. So at what point are you realizing what research you need to do? Are you writing and you found out that suddenly your characters are at the White House, so it's, I better go and look up about the White House? How does that work?
No, I would have probably thought about the where I'm going to get her, because this setting for me is what really does. I know the characters do run the novel. It's the story. It is the story between the characters, but the setting has a huge impact on the story. So I would probably know fairly much in advance, maybe about a third of the way through. I think, how am I going to get her? She's got to have a change of scenery. Oh, yes. And then, get to America. That would be brilliant. So I would immediately get hold of, several books, not just the one. And the thing with me is that I love the research so much. I'll have a book and I think, actually, Denise, you only need perhaps the 2 or 3 chapters in the middle and that other one that comes towards the end. And it is probably a big book. So I think, well, I'll just start the first chapter just to kind of get the setting of what the author is trying to get across to me. They're all obviously non-fiction books. And they're so fascinating and always so well written. I just read the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then I will write little notes and put bookmarks in, Post-it notes and everything in the book, so that I don't have to hunt too much for where things are. So yes, I do some quite soon. I might even do it before, if it pops into my mind. I can't just keep her in this setting. I want her to be out somewhere else. I probably would even do it before I start the book. And I would have done some more research on the cabinet war rooms as well, as I say, and also going there to refresh my memory with, because it isn't the same entrance. If you've not been and you ever do go, you won't be going in the same entrance as my characters go in the war. So there's all these details that have to be right, because I love the compliments when they say Molly Green is meticulous in her research, and it shows. I love that, because I feel that's what I aim to do.
Have you ever been caught out?
They thought they'd caught me out once, and I was so cross. I had a reviewer in the Historical Novel Society, and they do review my books, and I've always had lovely reviews. And this started off as another lovely review, and I thought, this is nice. And she said something, and I thought, if she'd read the next paragraph, she would have known that I hadn't said that. I was so cross. And I thought, it makes me look as if I've been, careless. But everybody said, including my agent, just leave it, And I said, I don't want to leave it. I want to tell them that I hadn't made a mistake. She was saying that pity that Molly Green had said that her heroine was going to be auditioned in a singing audition in the Royal Opera House and not in the Theatre Royal down the road. Well, she just stood outside the Royal Opera House and, looking at the building and enjoying the architecture. And then she just went off, next paragraph, she was at the Theatre Royal. I was cross about that. And then one very old lady, I had a bomb hit. Usually I'll try and have bombing raids when they truly happen, but occasionally I just do need to have an extra bomb. And then this old lady, she said, I'm enjoying Molly Green's books, but I don't remember a bomb coming down at that particular time in Liverpool. And I thought, oh, you are, you're right, whoever you are, because I did make up that particular bomb. But I am writing novels. But truly, if I'm saying something, it really is a fact, unless it's just part of the story.
And that is it for this week's episode with Molly Green. That new novel is Courage of the Cabinet Girl. It's out right now. If you'd like to take a look at it, if you're inspired to read, please make sure you use the Writer's Routine shop over at Bookshop.org, because then everyone gets a little helping hand from that, including your local independent bookshop. You can find the link for that in the episode notes. It's over on the menu at writersroutine.com too. Also, remember, you've got just a couple of weeks to take advantage of our brilliant offer with Writers Rising 2024. It's a worldwide, highly acclaimed writing retreat, and it's happening in just a few weeks. Find out more in the episode notes too, or you can get to writersrising.com and enter the code WR10 to get 10% off your in-person or virtual retreat ticket. Right, I'm sounding like one of those podcasts that gives way too many links, so I think we'll crack on. I will see you next week with a brand new episode of the show. Until then, bye.